Okay, so I'm a business school professor here at the Smith School of Business. I'm also somebody who has started a lot of companies and have done a lot of really interesting things. And I want to talk with you about some of the most important life lessons that I have gained in my career and time being an entrepreneur. I'm going to teach you and talk with you about the things that you don't learn in business school. So I grew up in Philadelphia. Anybody from Philly? Great place. Shame about the Eagles, right? Anyway, I'm a long-suffering Philadelphia Eagles fan. I grew up in Philly. I thought I was a really smart kid when I was in high school. I thought I was really amazing. And I thought I was so amazing I didn't have to go to school. I thought I was so amazing I could just hang out. And halfway through my junior year, I basically got a phone call. My mom got a phone call from the school. The phone call was, your son Jonathan hasn't been in school in 3.5 months. And she came home and she said, John, you haven't been in school in 3.5 months. I said, yeah, school bores me. I'm too good for school, man. I'm a rocket scientist. I've got all that. And we went to school the next day, and the principal sat down with me, and he looked at me, and he said, what is up with you? My mother starts him with, you let him down. You mean man, you let my son down by not letting me know. And he said, Mrs. Aberman, will you please leave the room? I would have paid $1 million just for that moment. But anyway, that's where we are. Mrs. Aberman, please leave the room. She leaves the room. The principal turns to me, and he says, look, you think you're smart. You think you're special. Here's a news flash, pal. You're not all that. The world doesn't care about you. It's up to you to make your way in the world. You're not all that. And you know what? He turned to me and he said, listen, if you want to graduate high school, you're going to have to go to night school in North Philly. Anybody know North Philly? Great place to be after dark. I think I only survived because everybody there assumed I was a narc. It's true. Hey, what's up, Starsky? Yo. You know, that was my life. But I graduated on time. And I learned no matter how important you think you are, until you give people a reason to think you're important, you are nothing to them. Nothing. But that's okay, which brings me to the next lesson I learned along the way. Use Jujutsu. Anybody know Jujutsu? It's the martial art where you take somebody's force. They're coming at you. They are going to kick your butt. And you go, whoops. Oh, sorry about that hammer lock. I used all your energy against you. I was lucky enough eventually to get into college. And I was lucky enough to do pretty well because, funnily enough, when you drop out of high school, you're pretty motivated. So I did well at school, and I ended up getting an opportunity to go to university over in England. So there I am, a nice kid from Philadelphia. I turn up in England. And I learned, much to my surprise, even though they speak English as well, they don't speak American. And they don't particularly like Americans. Some do because you're American. Some don't because you're American. But everywhere I went, nobody knew me, but they all had an opinion about what I was thinking, what I was doing, and who I was because of my accent. And I realized these people were never going to take me seriously unless I turned their prejudice against them. And so what I did was I became the most soft-spoken, well-mannered kid from Philadelphia that's ever lived. It's like, oh, hello, how are you? It's very kind, pass the salt, thank you very much. I learned which forks to use. It was unbelievable. You wouldn't recognize, I mean, now, thankfully, I've been able to outgrow it. But there I was, living the dream in ties and tails. But the lesson I learned was that in any situation, there are people that are going to come at you with prejudice. And sometimes it's racial, sometimes it's gender, sometimes it's young versus old, sometimes it's where you went to school, sometimes it's I don't like people who come to me on Mondays. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to understand the unspoken no's. And then you have a choice. The choice is you can try to power through it, and sometimes that works really well, but often it makes people feel uncomfortable, or you can embarrass the crap out of them by making them aware in their own little way that they are being narrow-minded. And for me, being a soft-spoken American was the most incredible tool ever because it forced them all to stop and think how interesting it was to meet somebody from Philadelphia who was as well-spoken as they were. And it made them stop and think and get to know me for me, and then I was able to have a conversation. This is one you're not going to hear at any business school. Plagiarize. Plagiarize. So my first job, the investment banking job, I turned up on my first day of work. And my boss sat me down. He was a guy from Staten Island. Anybody from New York? Staten Island, right? Can't get much more earthy than Staten Island. He sits down with me and says, John, I want to tell you the truth about investment banking. And I said, the suspenders? You know, the big money? He said, no, it's really very simple. What you got to do is you got to learn how to schmooze, and you got to learn to plagiarize. I had just graduated from one of the best law schools in the world. I had this white shoe, meaning exclusive education my parents happily paid for, and this guy is telling me I should plagiarize? That gets you thrown out of school. I looked at him, like, what are you talking about, plagiarize? I've got this upper echelon education. I am always original. I never plagiarize. And instead I said, what do you mean? Because I've learned a lesson about Jujutsu, right? So what do you mean? And he said to me, if you are ever wondering how to succeed in life, look at people around you that are successful and steal from them. What makes them successful? You don't have to invent everything. If somebody's being successful, if somebody is doing a job that you want to do, well, you know what? Figure out how he or she got there. Plagiarize. There's no shame in it. In fact, I would say the biggest shame, if you want to be entrepreneurs, by the way, entrepreneurship is not a single activity done in a closed room. It involves other people. So learning from other people, plagiarizing, is an essential skill to being an entrepreneur, even though an academic would never tell you to plagiarize. So here's a little story. So when I finished law school and I'd gotten my investment banking job in New York, I needed to move out of my dorm and move into an apartment. So at the time my brother was living in New York, he was a musician, and he and one of his musician buddies showed up in my dorm room with a truck, panel truck, to move me into this really swish East Side apartment. I have to have moved into the new place by 4, they shut down the elevators. We get in the van, we get everything loaded up in the van. It takes an hour. We get everything loaded up. The only thing that's left is a mattress. We looked at the van. There's no room for a mattress. There wasn't even room for a gnat. What the heck am I going to do with this mattress? Bobby says, let's put it on the roof. Okay, let's put it on the roof. We put it on the roof. Bobby, what are we going to fix it with? I have a single bungee cord. So off we go through Manhattan, driving down 2nd Avenue, heading towards my swish Upper East Side apartment. And you know what happened? Anybody know New York, the Second Annual Tunnel under the UN? All of a sudden there's this boom. The mattress springs off the van like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters and starts waddling down the street heading towards traffic. I leap out of the van. Oh my God, what's going to happen? A cab runs over the mattress, starts driving up the hill with flames shooting out from under the mattress as I imagine this taxi cab bursting into flame. I say, hey, there's a burning mattress under you. He looks at me like it happens every day, reverses and drives off, leaving a burning mattress in the middle of 2nd Avenue. I put out the fire. It can't possibly get any worse. Well, it's 4 o'clock. We turn up at the nice apartment building. They look at me and they say, yes, can I help you? I say, I'm Mr. Aberman, I'm moving to 11C. You can't move in, but I need to. I have no place to live. You can't move in. Okay, what am I going to do now? I walk out. Bobby is gone because the police have turned up and threatened to tow him again. And Bobby's decided it's 4 o'clock. This is a union gig. I'm done. So all my stuff is on the street. It's there. He's gone. My brother's gone. It's 4:15. As I'm sitting there, a delivery man comes up from Jennifer Convertibles and says, Mr. Aberman, yes, here's your sofa, and delivers the sofa to me on the street. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But I realized at that moment in time as I was sitting there, and by the way, eventually they took enough pity on me to let me put my stuff in the basement, and I treated myself to an amazing night at a great hotel. Bears a big shock. But the lesson I learned, and I've seen it again and again in my entrepreneurial life, is that if you ever in a moment think it can't get any worse, it can. And the true entrepreneur will be able to deal with that and turn that into success, whether it's getting a really great hotel room or it's figuring out how to move things forward in your business. That is a really important thing. People think entrepreneurship is about taking risks. It's not. Entrepreneurship is about not taking risks. It's about making informed decisions about what risks to take. The best entrepreneurs I know are people who spend their entire careers figuring out how to shift the risk of failure onto others. When an entrepreneur takes money from an investor, they are sharing the risk of the business failing with the investor. When an entrepreneur brings in somebody as a co-partner, they are sharing the risk of the business failure and the possibility of success. But if you get off on risk, if you're the kind of person who really likes to ski on the edge, don't be an entrepreneur. Because entrepreneurship is not about that feeling of being on the edge. Entrepreneurship is about the feeling of satisfaction of living a big life. Entrepreneurship is about the whole, the journey, the achievement. It's not about that hindbrain adrenaline rush you get when you're jumping out of an airplane. Another lesson I've learned along the way is that big businesses like to tell you if you become an employee that it's all a family. That's baloney. It's baloney. It's not family, it's a job. But when you are an entrepreneur and you start a business, make no mistake, you are in a business with your family. They are counting on you. They're dependent upon you. And how you act and what you do is going to have an effect upon them. I've learned this along the way. It's very important to have congruence with your family if you're going to undertake an entrepreneurial activity. The other thing I will tell you is that if you look at the overall level of success of businesses, family-owned businesses significantly and consistently outperform non-family businesses. If you looked at the public stock market, family-owned businesses always perform better because families have something that brings them together other than the pursuit of wealth, other than a job. Every business that matters, if you're an entrepreneur, is a family business, but it's not a family. So those are my views about how to think about entrepreneurship. I want to point out to you that ultimately, if you're interested in self-determination, if you're interested in feeling a sense of satisfaction, in my life experience, people generally have two big questions that they need to answer to have a happy life. The first one is, why am I here? And that's and for many people that's religion, it's cosmology, it's various ways of why am I here? Entrepreneurship answers the question, what are you going to do while you're here? And what I would suggest to you is that not all of you are going to be entrepreneurs starting businesses. Not all of you will. But all of you, over the next 30 to 40 years in your life, are going to have opportunities to take responsibility, to be a leader, to be inspirational. And when that moment happens, and when you see how that goes for you, my guess is that at that moment in time, you'll understand what it means to have a full and interesting life. Doesn't mean it's the only way you can do it, but if you're interested in the journey, entrepreneurship is absolutely terrific. The last thought I'll leave you with is, when I started Amplifier Ventures back in 2004, at the time I did it, I was working as a partner in a large law firm. And if you know anything about the legal industry, you know that that is a very secure way to make a lot of money. And I came home one day and I said to my wife, Veronica, I cannot do this for another day because I'm not in charge of my destiny. And she looked at me and she said, what do you want to do? And I said, truthfully, I don't know. But my parents own their own businesses. My grandparents own their own business. I want to own my own business. I don't want to be a lawyer in a law firm anymore. So with their support, I went off to try to figure out what to do. I eventually decided I would start a venture fund and help people start companies. But I talked with some entrepreneurs along the way while I was making my mind. And the most important lesson I learned was from a guy who was one of the early founders of America Online. And I sat down with him and he looked at me and he said, why do you want to become an entrepreneur? And I said, well, I want to have self-determination. He said, okay. I said, I want to matter. He said, okay. I want to change the world. Okay. I get all that. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And I said, what are you asking me? He said, are you trying to be an entrepreneur because you want to get rich? And I said, no. And he said, then you can be an entrepreneur. Because entrepreneurship is not about getting rich. Even though entrepreneurs can get really, really rich in our society, if that's your goal, get a job. Or learn how to go to your left and have a really sweet mid-range jump shot. But do not think for a minute that becoming an entrepreneur will allow you to make a lot of money. Let that go. Because I'll tell you what, I have years where I'm very happy with where I end up at the end of the year. And I've had years when I thought, oh, I really don't like going into my bank account very much. But I love what I do every single minute. And if I can impart anything to you, that's the most important life lesson of all. Capture your passion, follow your dreams, and don't ever lose track of the fact that the journey, the opportunity to be an entrepreneur is what will make you a big, big, happy person. Thank you very much.